Story 1. The Midnight Convoy. Robert Hayes had been driving 18-wheelers across the American heartland for 23 years, and he thought he'd seen everything the road could throw at him. Blizzards that turned highways into skating rinks, fog so thick you could barely see your own hood, and enough close calls with drunk drivers to fill a book. But nothing in those 2 decades prepared him for what happened on Interstate 80 through Nebraska in October of 2022. It was a Tuesday night, just past midnight, and Robert was hauling a load of agricultural equipment from Des Moines to Cheyenne. The highway stretched out before him like a ribbon of black silk under the pale moonlight, the kind of empty road that made you feel like the last person on earth. His CB radio crackled with occasional chatter from other drivers, but mostly it was just him and the hum of his Peterbilt's engine. The temperature had dropped significantly after sunset, and a thin mist was beginning to form along the edges of the highway. Robert adjusted his grip on the steering wheel and took a sip from his thermos of coffee, now lukewarm but still caffeinated enough to keep him alert. His GPS showed he was about 40 miles east of North Platte, making good time despite leaving Des Moines later than planned. That's when he first noticed the lights in his rearview mirror. 3 sets of headlights, spaced evenly apart, coming up fast behind him. Robert glanced at his speedometer. He was doing 65 in a 70 zone, perfectly legal for a loaded semi. The trucks behind him had to be pushing 80 or more to be gaining that quickly. He eased his rig toward the right lane, giving them room to pass. But they didn't pass. Instead, they slowed down and matched his speed, forming a perfect line behind him. Robert found it odd, but not alarming. Sometimes truckers traveled in informal convoys for company on long, boring stretches. He keyed his CB radio. Breaker 19, this is Big Rob eastbound on 80. You boys want to go around, or are we forming up? Static answered him. Then, after a long moment, a voice came through, flat, emotionless, barely human. Maintain speed. Maintain lane. Do not deviate. The hair on the back of Robert's neck stood up. That wasn't trucker talk. That wasn't how drivers communicated with each other. He looked in his side mirror, trying to get a better view of the trucks behind him, but the glare from their headlights made it impossible to see any details. No company logos, no identifying marks, just 3 identical sets of lights in perfect formation. Listen, buddy, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not interested, Robert said into the CB. I'm going to slow down and let you pass. Negative. Maintain speed. Maintain lane. Robert's hand tightened on the wheel. His instincts, honed by years on the road, were screaming at him that something was very wrong. He glanced at his GPS, still showing the same stretch of I-80, nothing unusual. But when he looked up at the highway signs, something made his stomach drop. The mileage markers were going backward. He'd just passed mile marker 177. Before that, it had been 178. And before that, 179. He was moving forward. The engine was running normally. The speedometer showed 65 miles per hour. But according to the signs, he was going in reverse. Robert's mouth went dry. He pressed harder on the accelerator, pushing up to 75. The trucks behind him adjusted immediately, matching his speed with eerie precision. The CB crackled again. Warning, do not deviate. Maintain formation. What the hell do you want? Robert shouted into the radio. No response. Just the steady crackle of static and the relentless pressure of those headlights behind him. He tried his cell phone. No signal. The GPS was still working, but now it showed him in a location that made no sense. According to the screen, he was driving through empty prairie land where no highway existed. Mile marker 176 flashed past. Then 175. He was definitely going backward despite moving forward. Robert made a decision. At the next exit, he was getting off this highway no matter what those trucks did. Exit 172 was coming up in what should have been 3 miles, but given the backward progression, he had no idea when it would actually appear. The mist was getting thicker now, rolling across the highway in waves. Robert turned on his high beams, but they barely penetrated the growing fog. The world outside his windshield had become a tunnel of gray, with only the white lines of the highway and those 3 sets of headlights visible behind him. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. There was a 4th truck now. Not behind him, ahead of him. Parked sideways across both lanes, completely blocking the highway. Its trailer was a dark, featureless rectangle, and it sat there silent and motionless in the fog. Robert slammed on his brakes, the air brakes hissing as his rig began to slow. Negative. Do not stop. Maintain speed. The voice on the CB had changed, becoming urgent, almost panicked. But Robert wasn't listening anymore. His truck was decelerating, the gap between him and the blocking vehicle shrinking rapidly. 50 feet. 40. 30. At 20 feet, he saw what was painted on the side of the blocking trailer in massive red letters. Turn back. Robert wrenched the wheel to the right, sending his rig onto the shoulder. The trailer swayed dangerously, and for a moment he thought it would jackknife, but the tires found purchase on the gravel and held. He shot past the blocking truck, catching a glimpse of its cab. Empty, no driver, windows dark as pits. The CB exploded with noise. Multiple voices, all talking at once, all saying the same thing. Turn back, turn back, turn back, turn back. Mile marker 171 appeared, then vanished almost immediately. Then 170. The progression was speeding up. Robert was still doing 60, but the markers were flashing past every few seconds now. 169, 168, 167. The three trucks behind him were closer now, their headlights so bright they flooded his cab with white light. He could see them clearly in his mirrors at last, and what he saw made his hands tremble on the wheel. They weren't trucks. Not really. The shapes were right. Cab, trailer, wheels, but they moved wrong, flowing across the pavement like liquid mercury poured into truck-shaped molds. Their headlights weren't lights at all, but glowing apertures that pulsed with inner luminescence. The numbers were counting down faster and faster. Robert saw an exit sign materializing out of the fog. Exit 145, next right. He didn't care where it went. He just needed off this highway. He began to merge right, but the truck things behind him moved to block him, spreading across both lanes. You will not leave. You will not deviate. You are part of the convoy now. The voice was coming from his CB, his phone, his radio, all at the same time. It echoed inside his cab, inside his head. The fog was so thick now that Robert could barely see beyond his hood. The highway had narrowed to a single lane, though he didn't remember it narrowing. The white lines were glowing with their own light, and the pavement beneath his wheels had taken on a strange, fluid quality. Mile marker 125 appeared, and Robert suddenly understood with perfect, terrible clarity what was happening. He wasn't going backward through miles. He was going backward through years. The highway, the night, everything around him was regressing through time, and he was being pulled along with it. He grabbed the CB handset. Who are you? What do you want? We are the Forever Convoy. We have been traveling this road since it was built. We will travel it until it crumbles to dust. And we need more drivers. Always more drivers. The road is hungry. The road is endless. Join us. Robert looked at his hands on the wheel and saw that they were changing. The skin was becoming translucent, the bones visible beneath like an X-ray. His wedding ring, which he'd worn for 18 years, was fading, becoming incorporeal. He thought of his wife, his 2 daughters. He thought of his little house in Iowa with the red door and the maple tree in the front yard. He thought of everything he would lose if he let this continue. With a roar of defiance, Robert did something that went against every instinct he'd developed in 23 years of professional driving. He wrenched the wheel hard to the left, aiming his truck directly at the concrete median barrier. And no, the voices screamed in unison. His truck hit the barrier at 60 miles per hour. The impact was tremendous, the sound of tearing metal and shattering glass filling the universe. Robert felt himself thrown forward against the seatbelt, felt the airbag deploy, felt the world spin into chaos. Then everything went black. When he opened his eyes, he was sitting in his truck on the shoulder of I-80, just east of North Platte. The sun was rising, painting the Nebraska plains in shades of gold and pink. His truck was undamaged. The load was still secure. According to his GPS and logbook, only 20 minutes had passed since midnight, but his coffee thermos was empty and cold. There were no other trucks around him. The highway was empty in both directions. Robert's hands were shaking as he checked his mirrors, his radio, his phone. Everything was normal. Everything was as it should be. Except for one thing. On his CB radio, permanently burned into the channel display, were 3 words: "You escaped." Once. Robert Hayes retired from trucking the following week. He sold his rig, paid off his house, and got a job at a local hardware store. He never drove at night again. And sometimes, when he's lying in bed unable to sleep, he swears he can hear the distant sound of diesel engines and voices calling his name, inviting him to rejoin the convoy. To this day, there are reports from truckers on I-80 through Nebraska of a mysterious convoy that appears after midnight. 3 trucks in perfect formation, always searching, always hunting for new drivers to join their endless journey through time and fog. Story 2. The Way Station. Patricia Sullivan had been hauling freight for 19 years, and she prided herself on knowing every way station, every rest stop, and every speed trap between Seattle and Miami. She kept meticulous logs, maintained her rig like it was a member of the family, and had a perfect safety record. So when she pulled into a way station on Highway 50 through Nevada in March of 2023, she expected nothing more than a routine inspection. It was 3 in the afternoon, the desert sun beating down mercilessly on the asphalt. Patricia was hauling electronics from Sacramento to Denver, making good time despite leaving 2 hours late due to a delayed loading dock. The way station appeared on the right side of the highway, exactly where it should have been according to her GPS, and the electronic sign read, "All commercial vehicles must enter." She flipped on her turn signal and guided her Kenworth onto the exit ramp. The way station looked standard enough. A small building, several lanes for trucks to roll across the scales, and a parking area for inspections. But as she got closer, Patricia noticed something odd. Despite it being the middle of a weekday, there were no other trucks in sight. No inspectors visible in the building. No movement at all. The facility looked abandoned. Patricia considered getting back on the highway, but her professional instincts won out. Skipping a mandatory way station could result in serious fines and points against her commercial license. She rolled down her window as she approached the scale, expecting to hear instructions from a speaker or see someone emerge from the building. Instead, the gates behind her closed with a heavy metallic clang. Patricia's heart rate picked up. She put her truck in park and looked around carefully. The way station was surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with razor wire, which she supposed was normal enough for security purposes. But the gates that had just closed shouldn't have been operational. This was supposed to be a pull-through facility, not a secured compound. She tried her CB radio. "Breaker 19, this is Trailblazer. Anybody got their ears on? I'm at the Highway 50 way station near Fearline, and something's not right here. Static. Nothing but pure, clean static." Her cell phone showed full bars, which was unusual for this part of Nevada. She dialed the Nevada DOT hotline. The call connected, rang once, and then a recorded message began to play. "Thank you for stopping at Facility 7. Please remain in your vehicle. Inspection will begin shortly. Do not attempt to leave. Do not exit your vehicle. Do not use communication devices." Patricia lowered the phone slowly. That wasn't a DOT message. That wasn't any kind of official recording she'd ever heard. And what the hell was Facility 7? This way station was officially designated as Fearline Way Station East. A door in the main building opened, and a figure emerged. Patricia felt a wave of relief that quickly curdled into unease. The person was wearing what looked like a DOT inspector's uniform, but it was wrong somehow. The color was slightly off, too gray, not quite matching the standard uniform blue. And the way they moved, stiff and mechanical, like a marionette being pulled by strings. The figure approached her truck. As it got closer, Patricia could see that it was a man, or at least man-shaped. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were hidden behind mirrored sunglasses that reflected the desert sun in unsettling ways. He gestured for her to roll down her window further. "License and registration," the figure said. His voice was wrong too, flat, monotone, like a computer-generated speech. Patricia's hands were trembling as she reached for her documents. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to slam the truck into gear and ram through those gates, but she forced herself to stay calm. Maybe this was just some weird security theater, some new protocol she hadn't heard about. She handed her documents through the window. The figure took them without really looking at them and stood there, motionless, for nearly a full minute. Just standing, staring at nothing. Patricia noticed that his chest wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. "Your cargo manifest," he finally said. "It's electronic. I can pull it up on my tablet. Paper only. Facility 7 requires paper documentation. I don't have paper. Everything's digital now, has been for years." The figure's head tilted at an angle that was just slightly too far to be natural, like an owl regarding prey. Violation. You must submit to full vehicle inspection. Park in Bay 3 and exit your vehicle. Listen, I don't know what kind of operation you're running here, but I know my rights. You can't detain me without probable cause, and you can't conduct a full inspection without proper authority. I want to speak to your supervisor. There is no supervisor. There is only Facility 7. Park in Bay 3. The figure turned and walked back toward the building with that same jerky, puppet gait. Patricia watched him go, her mind racing. This wasn't right. This wasn't legal. But those gates were closed, and she couldn't see any other way out. She put the truck in gear and slowly rolled forward to Bay 3, which was just an empty section of pavement next to the building. As soon as she parked, the door of the building opened again, and 3 more figures emerged. They all wore the same wrong-colored uniforms, moved in the same disturbing way, and wore the same mirrored sunglasses. They surrounded her truck. Patricia locked the doors and grabbed her phone, but it was showing no signal now despite having had full bars moments before. The CB was still just static. She was completely cut off. One of the figures approached her driver's side door and knocked on the window, 3 precise, evenly spaced knocks. Exit the vehicle for inspection. No, I'm not getting out. Open those gates and let me leave, or I'm calling the real police. You cannot call. You cannot leave. You must submit to inspection. All cargo passing through Facility 7 must be verified. Verified for what? This is just electronics, standard commercial freight. The figure's head tilted. We are not inspecting the cargo you carry. We are inspecting you. Patricia's blood turned to ice. What? All biological entities passing through Facility 7 must be verified for contamination. You are contaminated. You must be processed. The 3 figures began to pull tools from their belts. Not inspection tools, but instruments that looked medical, surgical. Gleaming metal that caught the sun in sharp, bright flashes. Patricia acted on pure instinct. She fired up the engine, slammed the truck into reverse, and floored it. The Kenworth shot backward with a roar, and she cranked the wheel hard, sending the trailers swinging around. The figures scattered, moving with inhuman speed. She shifted into drive and aimed directly for the gates. The truck picked up speed, 30 miles per hour, 40, 50. The gates loomed ahead, chain link and steel posts. She had no idea if she could break through, but she was damn well going to try. At the last second, something appeared in front of the gates. A shimmer in the air, like heat distortion, but vertical and massive. Patricia couldn't stop. Her momentum carried her forward, and the truck plunged into the shimmer. Reality twisted. The way station vanished. The desert vanished. Patricia found herself driving through what looked like an enormous warehouse, except the walls were miles away, and the ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness. She was on a highway that stretched through this impossible space, and on both sides of her, she could see other trucks, hundreds of them, thousands, all parked in perfect rows like exhibits in a museum. The trucks were old, ancient. Some of them were models from the 1950s, others from the 1970s, all perfectly preserved but covered in a fine layer of gray dust. And sitting in the driver's seat of each truck was a figure, a driver, frozen in place, unmoving, staring straight ahead with dead eyes. Patricia's scream caught in her throat. She pressed harder on the accelerator, desperate to find an exit, any exit. The highway through this nightmare warehouse seemed endless, curving away into the distance with no visible end. Then she saw it, a pinpoint of light ahead, bright and real. Sunlight. She aimed for it, pushing her truck to speeds it wasn't meant to handle, the trailer swaying dangerously behind her. The light grew larger, becoming a doorway, a portal back to reality. She burst through it with a sound like tearing paper and found herself back on Highway 50, rolling across the white line onto the main highway. Behind her, the way station was just gone, replaced by empty desert scrubland as if it had never existed. Patricia didn't slow down for 30 miles. When she finally pulled over at a legitimate rest stop, she sat in her cab shaking for an hour. She checked her GPS logs, her electronic logs, every piece of data her truck had recorded. According to all her instruments, she'd never stopped at all. The 15 minutes she'd spent at that impossible place didn't exist in any record. But when she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw that her hair had a single stripe of pure white running from her temple, where before it had been entirely brown. And on her steering wheel, where she'd gripped it so tightly during her escape, her handprints were burned into the material, like someone had held a blowtorch to it. Patricia Sullivan still drives trucks, though she plotted a new route that avoids Highway 50 entirely. She tells people the white streak in her hair is from stress, a genetic thing. But late at night, when she's alone in her truck, she sometimes sees that shimmer in the air on the road ahead, and she grips the wheel tighter, ready to drive straight through hell itself if she has to. Because she knows the truth, Facility 7 is still out there, still waiting, still collecting drivers for its endless museum of the lost. And if she ever stops when those gates close behind her again, she'll join that eternal parking lot, frozen forever behind the wheel with dead eyes staring at nothing. Story 3. The Impossible Passenger. Marcus Freeman had been driving cross-country routes for 15 years, and he had one unbreakable rule: never pick up hitchhikers. It wasn't about being unkind. It was about safety, liability, and company policy. But on a rainy night in September of 2022, somewhere on Route 90 through Montana, Marcus broke that rule. And breaking it changed everything about what he thought he understood about the world. The storm had rolled in around 10 p.m., turning the highway into a streaming river of water under his headlights. Marcus was hauling timber from Missoula to Billings, running about an hour behind schedule because of the weather. The rain was so heavy that his wipers could barely keep up, even on their highest setting, and visibility had dropped to maybe 50 feet. That's when he saw her standing on the shoulder, illuminated by a flash of lightning. A woman in a white dress, completely soaked, waving both arms at him desperately. Marcus's first instinct was to keep driving. Company policy, safety, all the rational reasons. But something about the scene bothered him deeply. This was Route 90 in the middle of nowhere, at least 20 miles from the nearest town in either direction. No car was visible on the shoulder, no buildings, nothing. How had she gotten there? And more importantly, what would happen to her if he just left her in this storm? Against every bit of training and common sense, Marcus began to slow down. He pulled the truck onto the shoulder about 50 yards ahead of where the woman was standing and put on his hazard lights. Through his mirror, he saw her running toward the truck, her white dress whipping in the wind and rain. He rolled down the passenger window as she reached the cab. Water poured in immediately. The woman stood there, looking up at him, and Marcus felt his throat go dry. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, pale skin, dark hair plastered to her face, and eyes that seemed too large, too expressive. But there was something off about her appearance, something he couldn't quite identify. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I need help. My car broke down miles back. My phone's dead. Please." Marcus made his decision. "Get in." Quickly, the woman climbed up into the cab with surprising agility and settled into the passenger seat. She was shivering violently, water streaming from her clothes onto the floor. Marcus grabbed a blanket from behind his seat and handed it to her. "Thank you," she said, wrapping herself in it. "Thank you so much. I didn't know what I was going to do." "What happened? Where's your car?" "Back there, maybe 5 miles. It just died. All the electronics at once. I tried to fix it, but I don't know anything about cars, and then my phone wouldn't work either. I've been walking for over an hour." Marcus frowned. 5 miles in this storm would take much longer than an hour, and she'd be in far worse shape if that were true. But he didn't say anything. He put the truck back in gear and pulled onto the highway, gradually building speed. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to sound friendly and non-threatening. "Sarah," she said after a brief pause. "Sarah Mitchell. I'm Marcus. I'm heading to Billings, but I can drop you at the next town. Probably be there in about 20 minutes. You can call for a tow, get someone to pick you up." "That would be wonderful. Thank you again." They drove in silence for a few minutes, just the sound of the rain hammering the roof and the rhythmic swish of the wipers. Marcus kept stealing glances at his passenger. Now that she was in the light of the cab, that sense of wrongness was stronger. She wasn't dripping anymore, despite having been soaked to the bone moments ago, and her skin had an odd quality to it, almost translucent, like porcelain. "Nasty storm," Marcus said, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. "Yes, very nasty." Sarah was staring straight ahead through the windshield, barely blinking. "You from around here?" "No, just passing through. Like you." Something in the way she said that made Marcus uncomfortable. He checked his GPS. The next town should be coming up soon, Another 15 miles. He'd drop her there and be done with this good deed. Marcus, Sarah said suddenly, do you believe in fate? I guess. I believe things happen for a reason sometimes. Yes, things happen for a reason. Like you stopping for me. That happened for a reason. Right? Because you needed help. No. She turned to look at him, and Marcus nearly swerved. Her eyes were completely black now, not just the pupils but the entire eye, like pools of ink. Because I needed you specifically. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. His mind was screaming danger, but he kept his voice calm. I think maybe you hit your head when your car broke down. You might be concussed. We should get you to a hospital. I didn't hit my head, and my car didn't break down. There is no car, Marcus. There never was. The temperature in the cab had dropped dramatically. Marcus could see his breath misting in the air. Sarah, or whatever she was smiling now, showing too many teeth that were too white and too sharp. What are you? Marcus whispered. I'm a passenger, like all the others. You see, Marcus, certain roads act as conduits. They're thin places where the boundaries between worlds become permeable. Route 90, this particular stretch, it's one of the thinnest. And trucks like yours, they're perfect vessels. You travel between places, never quite belonging to either your starting point or your destination. That makes you vulnerable. That makes you perfect. Marcus looked at his door handle, calculating if he could jump out at 50 miles per hour. Probably not without serious injury. He looked at the CB radio, but who would he call? What would he even say? What do you want, he asked. To go where you're going. To reach Billings. And then beyond. You see, people like me, we can't travel far on our own. We need assistance. A ride from someone who doesn't know what they're carrying. And if I refuse? Sarah's smile widened impossibly. You can't refuse. You already invited me in. You already made the choice. All that's left now is the journey. Marcus made a decision. He slammed on the brakes, hard. The truck's air brakes engaged with a tremendous hiss, and the rig began to decelerate rapidly. Sarah was thrown forward, not against the dashboard where the seat belt should have caught her, but into the dashboard, through it, her form becoming translucent and ghostly. You can't stop, she shrieked, her voice becoming distorted and inhuman. The road doesn't allow it. But Marcus had already brought the truck to a complete stop in the middle of the highway. He threw the door open and jumped out into the storm, running back the way they'd come, leaving his truck, his load, his livelihood, all of it behind. He didn't care. He just had to get away. The rain was so heavy he was instantly soaked, but he kept running, his boots splashing through deep puddles. Behind him, he heard a sound like tearing metal, and he looked back to see his truck, changing. The trailer was folding in on itself, the cab twisting like someone was wringing out a wet towel. And standing on the roof was Sarah, her white dress glowing with an internal light, her arms spread wide. Marcus, she called, her voice carrying impossibly over the storm. You can't escape what you've invited in. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance ahead of him, coming from the direction of Billings. Another truck. Without thinking, Marcus ran into the middle of the road, waving his arms frantically. The truck's air horn blared, but it began to slow. It pulled to a stop next to him, and the driver, a woman in her 50s with gray hair, leaned out. What the hell are you doing? You nearly got yourself killed. Marcus was gasping for breath, rain pouring down his face. There's something back there, something in my truck, something not human. The woman's expression changed from anger to concern. Get in. Now. Marcus climbed up into the cab, and the woman immediately hit the gas, accelerating away. He looked back through the passenger mirror and saw his truck, now a twisted wreckage of metal in the middle of the road, with Sarah standing on top of it, watching them go. As they got farther away, she began to fade, becoming transparent, then vanishing entirely. What was that? Marcus asked, his voice shaking. The woman kept her eyes on the road. A hitchhiker. A passenger, we call them. They appear on certain routes, always asking for help, always needing a ride. If you pick them up, they attach themselves to you, and they don't let go until they've reached their destination, wherever the hell that is. You're lucky you realized what was happening when you did. How do you know about this? Because I picked one up once, 7 years ago. Took me 3 days of non-stop driving, no sleep, no food, before I finally managed to shake her off. Cost me my marriage, my health, nearly my sanity. But I survived. And now I drive these routes looking for others who made the same mistake, trying to help them before it's too late. Marcus looked at her more carefully. She had the same translucent quality to her skin that Sarah had, and her eyes, though human-colored, had a strange depth to them, like looking into wells that went down forever. "You're one of them," he whispered. She nodded slowly. "I was human once. But when you carry a passenger for that long, something of them rubs off on you. Something stays behind. I'm what happens when you survive the journey. Changed, neither fully human nor fully other, stuck in between. What happened to my truck? It's gone. Consumed. The passenger took it as payment for being denied. Your insurance won't cover it, because officially it never existed. Check your paperwork. You'll find no record of that load, that route, that truck. The road takes what it wants." Marcus pulled out his phone with trembling hands. She was right. His load manifest was gone. His GPS showed him leaving Missoula, but then no data at all. It was as if the entire night had been erased. The woman dropped him off at a motel in Billings as the sun was rising, the storm having passed. Before he got out, she gave him one piece of advice. "Find a new profession, Marcus. You've been marked now. The road knows you. And if you keep driving, sooner or later, you'll see another hitchhiker. And next time, you might not be strong enough to refuse." Marcus Freeman did change professions. He works at a warehouse now, loading and unloading trucks, but never driving them. He tells people he got tired of the road, wanted to stay closer to home. But the truth is that he's terrified. Because sometimes, when he's helping load a trailer, he'll catch a glimpse of someone in a white dress standing at the far end of the warehouse, watching him. And he knows that Sarah hasn't forgotten him, that she's still waiting, that someday, somehow, she'll find a way to finish the journey he interrupted. On Route 90 through Montana, truckers report seeing a woman in white on the shoulder during storms. Most of them drive right past, following protocol. But occasionally, someone stops. And those drivers are never quite the same afterward, if they make it back at all. Because some passengers don't just want to ride. They want to take you somewhere you can never return from. Story 4. The Loop. Daniel Ortega had been hauling freight across Texas for 12 years when he entered the Loop. It was July of 2023, and he was driving a load of refrigerated pharmaceuticals from Houston to El Paso on Interstate 10. The run should have taken about 10 hours, give or take. Instead, it took 3 days, and by the time he escaped, if he really escaped at all, Daniel wasn't sure of anything anymore. It started normally enough. He left Houston at 6 a.m., the sun already promising another scorching summer day. His rig was running perfectly, the refrigeration unit humming along at exactly 38 degrees Fahrenheit. His fuel tanks were 3/4 full, and his logbook was updated and legal. Everything was exactly as it should be. The first sign that something was wrong came around noon. Daniel was just west of San Antonio, cruising along at 70 miles per hour with the AC blasting, when he passed a bright yellow billboard advertising a barbecue restaurant called Smokey's Pit. The image showed a cartoon pig wearing a chef's hat and the slogan, "Best Ribs in Texas, Exit 544. Daniel barely registered it. Billboards were just part of the landscape, white noise for the eyes. But 15 minutes later, he passed the exact same billboard again. Same cartoon pig, same slogan, same exit number, 544. He frowned. It wasn't unusual for restaurants to have multiple billboards, but they'd usually advertise different exits. Having 2 identical ones seemed like a waste of money. He checked his GPS. It showed him steadily progressing westward, just passing mile marker 550. 30 minutes after that, he passed the Smokey's Pit billboard again. Same image, same slogan, same exit, 544. Daniel's frown deepened. He keyed his CB radio. "Breaker 19, anybody westbound on I-10? This is long haul, anybody got their ears on?" A voice came back almost immediately, gravelly and tired. "This is Roadrunner, I'm westbound. What's your 20 long haul?" "Just past mile marker 560, heading toward Junction." "You seen anything weird with the billboards today?" A pause. Then, "Weird how?" "Like the same billboard multiple times. Smokey's Pit Barbecue, exit 544. The pause was longer this time. When Roadrunner spoke again, his voice had changed, becoming tight and careful. "Long haul, listen to me very carefully. How many times have you seen that billboard?" 3 times now." "Jesus Christ." "Okay, listen. Pull over right now. Don't wait. Don't keep driving. Pull over immediately. and shut off your engine. What? Why? What's going on? Just do it. You're in the loop, man. If you keep driving, you're never getting out. Daniel's heart began to pound, but he did as instructed. He pulled onto the shoulder and shut down the engine. The sudden silence was eerie after the constant rumble of the diesel. Okay, I'm stopped. Now what? Now you wait. The loop can't hold you if you're not moving. You wait for, hell, I don't know exactly. An hour, maybe? Then you start again, but you pay attention to everything. Every mile marker, every sign, every landmark. The moment you see anything repeat, you stop again. You understand. What is this? What loop? But the CB had gone silent, just empty static. Daniel tried calling again, but Roadrunner didn't respond. He sat there in the heat. The AC only worked with the engine running, and watched the traffic flow past. Normal cars, normal trucks, everyone going about their business. Nothing seemed unusual about the highway itself. The pavement was regular asphalt. The mile markers were standard DOT issue. The landscape was typical Texas scrubland. After exactly 1 hour by his watch, Daniel restarted the engine and pulled back onto the highway. He kept his eyes fixed on every detail, watching for any repetition. Mile marker 565 passed. Then 570. Then 575. Different billboards advertised different businesses, a hotel chain, a gas station, a law firm. No sign of Smokey's Pit. He began to relax. Maybe it had just been a weird coincidence. Or maybe he'd been more tired than he thought and had imagined seeing the same billboard multiple times. The human brain could play tricks under the monotony of long-distance driving. Then, at mile marker 580, he passed the Smokey's Pit billboard again. Same pig, same slogan, same exit, 544. Daniel's blood turned to ice. According to the mile markers, he'd just driven 20 miles westward. But according to that billboard, he was back at exit 544. He grabbed the CB. Breaker 19. This is long haul. Anybody out there? Roadrunner, you still listening? No response. He checked his GPS. It showed him at mile marker 580, progressing westward normally. But when he looked at the upcoming exit sign, it read, Exit 544, next right. That was impossible. He'd just been at 544 more than 30 miles back. Daniel kept driving, his mind racing. Maybe the mile markers were wrong. Maybe someone had installed them incorrectly during road maintenance. There had to be a rational explanation. Mile marker 590 appeared. Then 600. Different landscapes unfolded around him. A rocky outcropping here, a cluster of buildings there. But 10 miles later, the Smokey's Pit billboard appeared again. And then the landscape began to repeat. The same rocky outcropping, the same cluster of buildings, all in the same sequence. He was looping. The highway was somehow looping back on itself, creating a closed circuit that he couldn't escape. Daniel pulled over again and grabbed his phone. No signal, which was strange, because this part of I-10 usually had decent coverage. He tried the CB again, cycling through all the channels. Nothing but static on most of them, but on channel 19, he heard something that made his skin crawl. It was his own voice. Breaker 19. This is long haul. Anybody out there? He hadn't keyed the mic. That was a recording of his earlier call, somehow playing back to him on the radio. What the hell is happening? Daniel said aloud. The CB crackled. You're in the loop, said a voice. Not Roadrunner this time, but someone else. A woman, her voice distorted and distant. How many times have you seen the billboard? 6 times. Maybe 7. I don't know. You're deep in then. Stopping doesn't help once you're that deep. The loop has you. How do I get out? Some people don't. Some people drive it forever, going around and around until they run out of fuel or food or sanity. The lucky ones crash. At least then it's over quick. Daniel's hands were shaking on the wheel. That's not an answer. Tell me how to get out. There might be a way, but it's dangerous, and I can't promise it'll work. You have to break the pattern. You have to do something different, something unexpected. The loop functions on repetition, on sameness. If you can introduce enough chaos, enough deviation, you might tear a hole in it. But if you fail, you could make it worse. You could become permanently stuck. I'll take that chance. What do I do? When you see the billboard next time, take the exit. Exit 544. Don't stay on the highway. That'll take me away from my route. Your route doesn't exist anymore. You're not on I-10, not really. You're on something else, something that's wearing I-10's face. Take the exit. See where it goes. It might lead you out, or it might lead you deeper. That's all I can tell you." The CB went silent again. Daniel sat there for a long moment, weighing his options. He could keep driving the loop, hoping it would eventually release him. He could pull over and wait indefinitely, though he only had enough food and water for maybe 2 days. Or he could follow the mysterious woman's advice and take the exit, heading into unknown territory. He made his choice. He started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. The loop continued. Same billboards, same landmarks, same inexorable repetition. But this time, when the Smokies pit sign appeared, Daniel activated his turn signal and took the exit. The off-ramp curved to the right, and suddenly everything changed. The landscape shifted in impossible ways, the scrubland becoming pine forest, becoming desert, becoming grassland, all within the space of a quarter mile. The sky above him flickered between day and night like a strobe light. His GPS went completely haywire, showing him simultaneously in Texas, Nevada, Alaska, and locations that didn't have names, just coordinates that didn't make sense. At the bottom of the ramp, there was a stop sign. Beyond it, a two-lane road stretched into the distance, perfectly straight, lined on both sides with telephone poles that reached up into infinity. Daniel turned onto the road, because there was nowhere else to go. He drove for what felt like hours, though his clock showed only minutes passing. The telephone poles flashed by in hypnotic rhythm. There were no other vehicles, no buildings, no signs of civilization. Just the road and the poles and the flickering, uncertain sky. Then, ahead of him, he saw a truck pulled over on the shoulder. A big rig, similar to his own. And standing next to it was a man, waving at him. Daniel slowed down and pulled up alongside. The man was old, maybe 70, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much. He was wearing a trucker's cap and a vest with dozens of patches from different trucking companies. "You're new," the old man said. It wasn't a question. "I'm lost. I'm trying to get back to I-10. The old man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I-10? Jesus. I was trying to get back to Route 66. Been trying for 40 years. Daniel's stomach dropped. 40 years. Time's different here. It might have been 40 years outside, or 40 minutes, or 40 seconds. Can't tell anymore. But I've been driving this road since 1983, and I haven't found an exit yet." He gestured at the infinite line of telephone poles. "But I keep trying. What else is there to do? There has to be a way out. Maybe. Or maybe this is all there is now. The eternal road, the forever drive. Maybe we're dead, and this is hell. Or maybe we're alive, and this is something worse." The old man looked at Daniel with eyes that held depths of despair. "All I know is that once you leave the loop, you can't go back. You can only go forward. So you keep driving, and you hope that eventually, you'll find something other than just more road." Daniel wanted to say something, to offer hope or comfort, but what could he say? Instead, he just nodded and pulled back onto the road, leaving the old man standing by his truck, another eternal sentinel on the infinite highway. He drove, and drove, and drove. Eventually, hours or days or weeks later, he couldn't tell, a sign appeared on the side of the road. I-10 West, next exit. Daniel didn't trust it. How could he? But what choice did he have? He took the exit, and found himself on I-10, just west of Junction, Texas. The GPS showed him at mile marker 620. His clock showed that 4 hours had passed since he left Houston. Not 3 days. For hours. He pulled over at the next rest stop and just sat there, shaking. His logbook showed a normal, continuous drive. His fuel gauge was exactly where it should be for 4 hours of driving. It was as if nothing had happened. But when Daniel opened his trailer to check on his cargo, he found something that shouldn't have been there. A small carved wooden sign that read Smoky's Pit, best ribs in Texas. Daniel Ortega completed his delivery to El Paso, but he drove during the day only, and he never took I-10 through that section of Texas again. He tells people he avoids it because of construction, or traffic, or personal preference. But the truth is that he's terrified he'll see that billboard again. Because next time, the woman's voice told him, the loop might not let him go. Next time, he might meet the old man from the infinite road and realize that he's looking at his own future. They say that if you drive I-10 through West Texas late at night, sometimes you'll pass a yellow billboard for a restaurant called Smoky's Pit. Most people drive right past without thinking about it. But if you see it more than once, if you notice it repeating, pull over immediately. Because the loop is always hungry, always looking for new drivers to trap in its eternal circuit. And once you're deep enough in, the only way out might lead you somewhere even worse than where you started. Story 5. The Cargo. William Chun had been driving refrigerated loads for 17 years, and he'd hauled everything from fresh produce to frozen meat to temperature-sensitive medical supplies. He was particular about his cargo, always double-checking the load, always verifying the temperature logs, always making sure his insurance was current. So when he picked up a sealed shipment in Portland, Oregon in November of 2022, he did everything by the book. And that's why what happened next was so completely impossible to explain. The pickup was at a pharmaceutical warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The paperwork identified the cargo as medical research materials being transported to a facility in Boise, Idaho. Temperature requirements were strict, exactly 34 degrees Fahrenheit, with no variation above 36 or below 32. The trailer was preloaded and sealed when William arrived, which wasn't unusual for certain types of sensitive cargo. What was unusual was the contract itself. The pay was triple his normal rate for a fairly short haul. The pickup was scheduled for exactly midnight, and there was a specific clause stating that under no circumstances was he to open the trailer or break the seal until delivery, with a penalty of $100,000 for violation. William's first instinct was to refuse the job. It had all the hallmarks of something illegal or dangerous. But the company checking out, the paperwork was legitimate. He verified it with the proper authorities, and the temptation of that payday was strong. His daughter's college tuition was due, and this one job would cover the entire semester. So he took it. The trailer was already hooked up to the tractor they'd designated for him, a brand new Freightliner with all the latest refrigeration monitoring equipment. William did his pre-trip inspection, verified the temperature was set correctly at 34 degrees, and pulled out of the warehouse at exactly 12:15 a.m. The drive to Boise would take about 8 hours along I-84, mostly through the Columbia River Gorge and then across eastern Oregon. It was a route William had driven dozens of times, and he expected nothing but a routine trip followed by a very nice payday. The first 3 hours were completely normal. Light traffic, clear roads, the refrigeration unit humming steadily. William listened to a podcast, drank coffee from his thermos, and watched the dark landscape roll past his windows. Then, at exactly 3:15 a.m., somewhere between Pendleton and La Grande, his refrigeration alarm went off. William's heart sank. The temperature display was showing 39 degrees, 5 degrees above the acceptable maximum. He immediately pulled onto the shoulder and ran through his checklist. The refrigeration unit was running, the engine was operating normally, the fuel levels were fine. Everything looked like it should be working, but the temperature kept climbing. 40 degrees. 41. He grabbed his phone to call the shipping company's emergency line, but there was no signal. Not unusual in this part of Oregon, but frustrating. He tried the CB radio, but got only static. 42 degrees. 43. William made a decision. He knew there was a truck stop about 10 miles ahead. He'd get there, use their phone to call for a refrigeration technician, and hope that whatever was in his trailer could survive the temperature fluctuation. He merged back onto the highway and pushed his speed up to 75. 5 miles from the truck stop, something started knocking inside the trailer. William heard it clearly through the cab, a rhythmic pounding, like someone hammering on metal. Boom, boom, boom. 3 evenly spaced knocks, then silence. Then 3 more knocks. His hands tightened on the wheel. Cargo didn't knock. Cargo didn't make sounds like that. Unless. He didn't want to think about the unless. About what kind of medical research materials might make knocking sounds. About why someone would pay triple rate for a midnight pickup of something that couldn't be examined by the driver. The knocking continued. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, pause. The temperature was now at 48 degrees and still climbing. William pulled into the truck stop and parked in the most well-lit area he could find. The parking lot was nearly empty, just 2 other trucks and a scatter of cars. The attached diner was closed for renovations, though the fuel pumps were still operational. He sat in his cab, listening to that impossible knocking, trying to decide what to do. Call the police? But and tell them what? That his cargo was making noise? Open the trailer and risk a $100,000 penalty? Drive to Boise and hope the knocking stopped? The decision was made for him. The temperature display suddenly dropped back to 34 degrees. Just like that, with no explanation. And the knocking stopped. William sat there for another 10 minutes, but everything remained normal. Temperature steady, no sounds from the trailer. Eventually, he convinced himself it had been some kind of mechanical glitch, maybe an air pocket in the refrigeration system or the cargo settling. He got back on the road. For the next hour, everything was fine. The highway was empty, the night was dark, and the only sounds were his engine and the wind. William started to relax, started to think about what he'd do with that triple-rate paycheck. Then his CB radio came to life with a voice that wasn't quite human. "Driver," it said, each word carefully enunciated in a tone that was too flat, too measured. "We require you to stop the vehicle." William grabbed the CB handset. "Who is this? How did you get on my channel?" "We are the cargo. We require you to stop." His blood turned to ice. That wasn't possible. Cargo didn't talk. Cargo didn't use radios. This had to be someone playing a prank, someone who'd hacked his radio frequency. "This isn't funny. Get off this channel. We are not attempting humor. We require you to stop the vehicle. Our containment is compromised. Temperature fluctuations have caused premature activation." William looked at his temperature display, still reading 34 degrees, perfectly normal. "My temperature is fine. Everything is fine. Leave me alone. Your instruments are incorrect. We are experiencing thermal cascade. We are waking up. We require you to stop and release us, or there will be consequences." "I'm not stopping, and I'm sure as hell not opening that trailer. I don't know who you are or what kind of scam you're running, but I'm driving straight to Boise and delivering this load." A pause. Then, "That is unfortunate." The temperature display flickered and went dark. Then every light on William's dashboard went dark. The engine didn't die, but all his electrical systems shut down. Headlights, marker lights, dashboard, everything. He was driving blind down a dark highway at 70 miles per hour with no illumination. William slammed on the brakes, bringing the truck to a shuddering stop on the shoulder. He tried restarting the electrical system, but nothing responded. The engine was still running. He could hear it, feel it, but every electronic component was dead. Except the CB radio, which crackled to life again. "You will release us now." "I can't," William said, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. "The trailer is sealed. I don't have the key. Even if I wanted to open it, I couldn't." "Then we will open it ourselves." A sound came from the trailer, a terrible screech of tearing metal. William jumped out of the cab and ran around to the back, using his phone's flashlight to see. The trailer's back doors were bulging outward, the metal deforming as if something enormously strong was pushing from inside. As he watched, frozen in horror, the doors exploded outward with a bang that echoed across the empty landscape. White mist poured out of the trailer, the refrigerated air meeting the warmer night atmosphere. And in that mist, William saw shapes moving. They weren't human. They were humanoid, roughly the right size and proportion, but wrong in fundamental ways. Their joints bent at angles that shouldn't have been possible. Their skin, visible through the mist, had a translucent quality like jellyfish. And their eyes glowed with a pale blue light that had nothing to do with normal biology. There were 6 of them, and they climbed down from the trailer with fluid, unsettling movements. William dropped his phone and ran. He didn't think, didn't plan, just ran into the darkness along the highway shoulder. Behind him, he heard sounds, clicking, wet sounds like nothing he could identify. "Driver," that voice called out, now coming from the creatures themselves rather than the radio. "Driver, you cannot escape. We require your assistance." William kept running, his lungs burning, his legs pumping. The landscape was flat scrubland, nowhere to hide, but he didn't care. He just needed distance, needed to get away from those things. Something wrapped around his ankle, and he fell hard onto the pavement. He rolled over and saw one of the creatures had extended an appendage, not quite an arm, but a tendril of that translucent flesh, and grabbed him. It was pulling him back toward the truck. "Please," William gasped. "Please don't kill me. I have a daughter. I have a family. We do not wish to harm you. We require only information." The creature's face came close to his, those glowing eyes fixed on him with alien intelligence. "Where are we? What year is it? Who transported us?" "Oregon. It's 2022. I don't know who you are. I was just hired to drive the truck." 2022, the creature repeated. It conferred with the others in sounds that weren't quite language. "We were placed in stasis in 2039. That is 17 years from now. This is not correct. This is not the proper timeline. William's mind was reeling. What are you talking about? 2039 hasn't happened yet. For you, correct. But we are from that future. We were research subjects, placed in cryogenic suspension for transport to a long-term facility. Something has gone wrong. We have been displaced backward through time. Despite his terror, William felt a strange curiosity. How is that possible? It should not be possible. Temporal displacement of this magnitude requires energy beyond anything available in our era. Unless the creature's eyes somehow widened. Unless the facility was destroyed. Unless containment was breached not just for us, but for the temporal stabilizers. Another creature approached, and they had a rapid exchange in their clicking language. Then the first one turned back to William. Driver, we require you to take us to your point of origin. To Portland. There is something we must prevent. No way. No. I'm not doing anything except getting as far from you as possible. You do not understand. If we are here, now, 17 years displaced, then the catastrophe that destroyed our facility has already begun. The temporal breach is expanding backward through time. If we do not stop it at its source, your entire timeline will be unraveled. Reality itself will become unstable. That's not my problem. William tried to pull his leg free, but the creature's grip was unbreakable. It is everyone's problem, including your daughter, including your family. By the time you notice reality failing, it will be too late. Memories will change. History will rewrite itself. People will disappear as their timelines are erased. We have perhaps 72 hours before the cascade reaches critical mass. William looked at the creature, at its glowing eyes, and saw something there he hadn't expected: desperation. Fear. These things, whatever they were terrified. What do you need me to do? Return us to the pharmaceutical warehouse. We must find the research team that created us. They are the ones who will build the temporal stabilizers 17 years from now. If we can prevent that research from beginning, we can prevent the catastrophe. But if you prevent your own creation, won't you cease to exist? Yes, the creature said simply. We will become paradoxes. We will never have been born, never have existed. But that is acceptable if it prevents the end of reality. William made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He nodded. Okay, let's go. The drive back to Portland took 6 hours. William's electrical systems mysteriously came back online once he agreed to help, though he suspected the creatures had something to do with that. They rode in the trailer, 6 impossible beings from an impossible future, while William tried to process everything he'd learned. They reached the pharmaceutical warehouse just before dawn. The creatures exited the truck and approached the building, moving with purpose. William watched from his cab as they bypassed the security systems, not by force, but by somehow convincing the electronic locks that they were authorized personnel. 30 minutes later, they emerged, and the building behind them began to burn. The creatures returned to William's truck. It is done, the first creature said. The research materials have been destroyed. The computer files have been wiped. The scientists' memories of the key discoveries have been removed. The path to our creation no longer exists. What happens to you now? We fade. Already we feel ourselves becoming less real. Within hours, we will simply be gone, as if we never existed. But reality will be preserved. Your daughter will have a future. I'm sorry, William said, and he meant it. Do not be. We were created as tools, not as beings with lives of our own. This ending is better than the alternative. The creature's glow was already dimming. Drive away now, driver. When you look back, we will be gone. William did as instructed. He put the truck in gear and drove out of the parking lot. In his rearview mirror, he saw the creatures standing in a circle, their forms becoming transparent, like ghosts fading in morning light. By the time he reached the highway, they had vanished completely. William Chin never spoke about what happened that night. He couldn't. Who would believe him? The warehouse burned down, which was attributed to an electrical fire. No investigation ever mentioned anything unusual. His truck's GPS records showed a normal trip from Portland to La Grande and back, with no unexplained stops or detours. But William knows what he saw. And sometimes, late at night, he wonders about those creatures, beings that never existed, beings that sacrificed themselves to save a reality that would never remember them. He wonders if anyone else will ever know what they prevented, What apocalypse was erased from history before it could begin? And sometimes, just sometimes, when he's driving late at night on empty highways, he sees shapes in his headlights that move just a little too fluidly, that bend at angles just a little too wrong. And he wonders if the creatures really did cease to exist, or if they're still out there somehow, trapped between timelines, forever guarding against paradoxes that threaten reality. He never took another overnight run. He never transported sealed cargo again. And he tells his daughter that he loves her every single day because he knows, in a way no one else does, just how fragile existence really is. Story 6. The Rest Stop. Jennifer Calloway had been driving interstate routes for 14 years when she made the mistake of stopping at the rest area on Highway 95 through Idaho in August of 2023. It was a decision that should have been routine, unremarkable, the kind of thing she'd done thousands of times before. But this particular rest stop was different. And by the time she realized just how different, it was almost too late to escape. It was around 2 in the morning when Jennifer's bladder and fatigue finally convinced her to pull off the highway. She'd been hauling construction equipment from Seattle to Salt Lake City, making good time despite a late start, and she'd been planning to push through to Twin Falls before stopping. But biological necessities had their own schedule, and the blue rest area sign appeared at exactly the right moment. She took the exit and followed the winding access road through pine trees to a standard-looking rest facility. Parking lot with spaces for both cars and trucks, a brick building with restrooms and vending machines, a couple of picnic tables, information boards about local attractions. Sodium lights cast orange pools of illumination across the pavement. 2 other vehicles were parked there, a silver sedan and a pickup truck with a camper shell. Jennifer parked her rig, grabbed her phone and keys, and headed for the restroom building. The night was quiet except for the chirping of crickets and the distant sound of highway traffic. The air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of pine needles. The women's restroom was typical for a rest area: tile floors, metal stalls, fluorescent lights that hummed with electrical current. Jennifer used the facilities, washed her hands, and was drying them with paper towels when she noticed something odd. The lights had gotten brighter. Not dramatically, but noticeably. The fluorescent tubes now glowed with an intensity that hurt to look at directly. And the hum had changed pitch, becoming higher, almost painful to hear. Jennifer finished drying her hands and pushed open the restroom door. She stepped out into the common area between the men's and women's rooms, and that's when she realized something was very wrong. The parking lot outside the windows had changed. The 2 vehicles that had been there, the sedan and the pickup, were gone. But so were the trees. Instead of the pine forest that had surrounded the rest area, she could see open grassland stretching to the horizon, illuminated by daylight despite it being 2 in the morning. Jennifer blinked hard and looked again. The view didn't change. Through the windows, she could clearly see a sunlit landscape that shouldn't exist. She walked to the exit door and pushed it open. A wall of heat hit her immediately, the kind of heat that only came in the middle of summer, in the middle of the day. The parking lot pavement shimmered with rising heat waves. Her truck was still there, exactly where she'd parked it, but everything around it had transformed. The pine forest was gone, replaced by prairie grass and scrub. The highway was gone. No sign of Route 95, no exit ramp, nothing. The rest stop building sat in the middle of endless open land like an island in a sea of grass. "What the hell?" Jennifer whispered. First time, she spun around. A man was sitting at one of the picnic tables that had been empty moments before, middle-aged, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt, looking exhausted and resigned. "First time for what?" Jennifer asked, her hand instinctively moving to the pepper spray on her belt. "First time being stuck here, at the rest stop that isn't really a rest stop." He gestured at the impossible landscape around them. "I'm Gary Morrison. I've been here for, well, I'm not sure anymore. Could be days, could be weeks. Time doesn't work right here." Jennifer wanted to run, wanted to get back in her truck and drive away from this madness, but she forced herself to stay calm and think. "What do you mean, time doesn't work right?" Gary stood up and walked closer, moving slowly to show he wasn't a threat. "You went into the bathroom at night, right? Came out in daytime. That's how it starts. The rest stop shifts. It moves through time and space randomly, taking anyone inside the building with it. I was taking a nap in my car when it happened to me. Woke up and everything had changed. That's impossible." "Yeah, I thought that too." But I've watched this place shift 6 times now. Sometimes it's day, sometimes night. Sometimes it's winter with snow everywhere. Sometimes it's summer like now. Once, it was raining so hard I couldn't see more than 10 feet. The landscape changes each time. Forest, prairie, desert, mountains. But the highway never comes back. There's never a road out. Jennifer looked at her truck. I can just drive away. Follow my GPS back to the highway. Your GPS won't work. None of the technology works properly. Well, it works, but it gives you nonsense. My phone says I'm in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. My car's GPS says I'm in Antarctica. They're both wrong. We're somewhere else. Somewhere that's not properly part of our world. To prove his point, Jennifer pulled out her phone. Gary was right. Her GPS was showing her location as unknown, and when she tried to get directions, the app just spun endlessly without loading anything useful. I've tried driving away, Gary continued. 3 times. Each time, I drove for what felt like hours, but the rest stop never got any farther away. It stayed on the horizon behind me, same distance no matter how long I drove. Eventually, I ran low on fuel and had to come back. My car's almost out of gas now. Jennifer felt panic rising in her chest. There has to be a way out. You said it shifts through time and space. Maybe during one of the shifts, it'll put us back on the highway. Maybe. Or maybe it'll shift somewhere worse. The last shift, it was night, and there were things moving out in the darkness. Things that weren't animals. I stayed in the building until it shifted again. As if on cue, the lights inside the rest stop building began to flicker. Jennifer felt a strange sensation, like pressure building in her ears, like just before a thunderstorm. Gary's eyes widened. It's shifting again. Get inside the building, quick. They ran for the entrance. Jennifer's truck was still right there. She could see it, could reach it in 10 seconds if she ran. But something in Gary's voice, something in the way the very air seemed to be vibrating, made her follow him instead. They made it inside just as the shift happened. It felt like an elevator dropping suddenly. That stomach-lurching sensation of motion without movement. The lights blazed bright, then dimmed, then stabilized. The humming became a roar, then settled back to normal. Through the windows, the landscape had changed again. It was night now, but not a natural night. The sky was the wrong color, a deep purple rather than black, and it was full of stars, but they were arranged in patterns Jennifer didn't recognize. The ground outside was rocky and barren, like a desert, but the rocks had strange geometric shapes, almost crystalline. Where are we? Jennifer whispered. I don't know, but I don't think we're on Earth anymore. Not our Earth, anyway. Something moved in that alien landscape, a shape like a massive insect, the size of a car, skittering across the rocks on too many legs. Jennifer felt her sanity starting to slip. This can't be happening. This is a nightmare. I'm going to wake up. Gary grabbed her shoulders, not roughly, but firmly enough to focus her attention. Listen to me. You can't break down. I've seen it happen. There was a woman here when I first arrived. She couldn't handle it, couldn't accept what was happening. She ran outside during one of the shifts, just started running and screaming. The rest stopped shifted again while she was out there, and she never came back. You have to stay calm, stay rational, and wait for an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To escape. I've been studying the patterns, trying to figure out the rules. The shifts happen at irregular intervals, but there's always that pressure feeling right before they occur. And I think, I'm not certain, but I think that the shifts are cycling through possibilities. Eventually, one of them has to put us back where we belong. Eventually could be never. Maybe, but it's the only hope we have. They waited. Minutes stretched into hours, or what felt like hours. Jennifer's phone clock had frozen at 2:17 a.m. and wouldn't update. They sat at the picnic tables, drinking water from the vending machines, which worked, inexplicably, despite the quarters they used disappearing into nothing, and watched the impossible landscape outside cycle through variations. Desert at twilight. Ocean at noon, with the rest stopped somehow sitting on a small island. A city at night, but the buildings were wrong, too tall, too narrow, glowing with colors that hurt to look at. A forest where the trees were black and the leaves were silver. Each time, the pressure would build, the shift would happen, and they'd find themselves somewhere new and equally impossible. During the 4th shift after Jennifer arrived, Gary spotted something through the window that made him jump to his feet. There. Look, in the distance, Barely visible through what appeared to be morning fog, was a highway. A normal, Earth-standard highway with white lines and green mile marker signs. "That's it," Gary shouted. "That's the way out." He ran for the door, and Jennifer ran after him, screaming for him to wait, to be careful. But he was already outside, sprinting across the parking lot toward his car. The pressure sensation began. Gary, no. It's shifting. He either didn't hear her or didn't care. He reached his car, yanked the door open, jumped inside. Jennifer stood in the doorway, caught between running after him and staying in the building. The shift happened. Gary's car vanished. Not slowly, not fading away, but just gone in an instant, as if someone had edited it out of reality. The landscape changed to a mountain range covered in snow. The highway was gone. Jennifer screamed his name, but there was no response. She stood there in the doorway, staring at the empty space where his car had been, understanding what had just happened. Gary had been outside the building during a shift, and the rest stop had moved without him. He was gone, stranded in that foggy landscape, while Jennifer was still trapped here. She walked slowly back inside and sat down at one of the picnic tables, her mind numb with shock. For the next unknowable period of time, hours or days, she couldn't tell, Jennifer was alone. The rest stop shifted through its carousel of impossible locations. She ate snacks from the vending machines and drank water. She tried to sleep on the hard benches, but couldn't manage more than brief, fitful dozes. And she thought about patterns, about probability, about the nature of what was happening. The rest stop was shifting through realities, through times and places. But it was also shifting through the building's own timeline. Sometimes the vending machines were fully stocked, sometimes empty. Sometimes the bathrooms were clean, sometimes dirty. Sometimes there were different posters on the information boards. The rest stop wasn't just moving through space. It was moving through its own history, through every moment of its existence across multiple timelines. And if that was true, then somewhere in the carousel of shifts, there had to be a moment when it was sitting on Highway 95 in Idaho in August of 2023, in its proper place and time. Jennifer just had to wait for that exact moment and be ready to move. She prepared carefully. She positioned herself in the doorway, one hand on the frame, ready to run. She kept her truck keys in her hand. She watched through the windows, studying every landscape, every time period, waiting for the one that looked right. Shift, ancient jungle, massive ferns like prehistoric times. Shift, burning wasteland, everything on fire. Shift, empty white void, nothing but whiteness in all directions. Shift, pine forest at twilight. Highway visible through the trees. That one was close, but the highway was wrong. It was older, less maintained, probably from decades in the past. Shift, underwater, somehow, the buildings surrounded by dark ocean. Shift, pine forest at night. Highway visible. Modern cars passing by. Jennifer's heart hammered. This was it. Had to be it. She felt the pressure building for the next shift and made her decision. She ran. She sprinted across the parking lot faster than she'd ever run in her life, hit the truck's door handle, yanked it open, threw herself inside. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. She could feel the shift building, the air pressure changing, the lights behind her starting to flicker. The engine caught. She slammed the transmission into drive and floored the accelerator. The truck surged forward just as the shift happened. Jennifer felt it, that elevator drop sensation, but she was moving, crossing the boundary of the rest area, hitting the access road. The world wavered around her like a heat mirage, reality bending and flexing. And then she was on Highway 95, normal traffic flowing around her, the night sky overhead showing familiar constellations, and her GPS screen displaying Route 95 South with perfect clarity. Jennifer merged into traffic and kept driving, not daring to look back, half expecting the rest stop to reach out and drag her back. But it didn't. She was free. She drove straight through to Salt Lake City without stopping, not even for fuel until she was well clear of Idaho. When she finally did stop, at a well-lit truck stop with dozens of other vehicles around, she sat in her cab and shook for 20 minutes. Jennifer Calloway still drives long-haul routes, though she never stops at rest areas anymore. She uses truck stops exclusively, no matter how inconvenient, no matter how much out of her way. And she's filed reports with the Idaho DOT about the rest area on Highway 95, though they insist no such facility exists in the location she describes. Sometimes, late at night, she thinks about Gary Morrison. She wonders if he made it out, if he found his own moment to escape, or if he's still there, still trapped in that carousel of impossible places, waiting for a chance that may never come. And she wonders about other drivers who might stop there, thinking it's just a normal rest area, not knowing they're stepping into a trap that exists outside of normal space and time. She hopes they're lucky. She hopes they figure out the pattern before it's too late. Because some places aren't really places at all. Some facilities exist in the cracks between realities, catching unwary travelers like flies in a web. And once you're caught, escape is just a matter of luck, timing, and the desperate hope that eventually, the carousel will spin back to where you began. Story 7. The Radio Voices. Thomas McKenzie had been a long-haul trucker for 21 years, and in all that time, he'd treated his CB radio as both a tool and a companion. The constant chatter of other drivers kept him company on lonely midnight highways, warned him about speed traps and accidents, and connected him to a community of people who understood the unique challenges of life on the road. So when the voices on his CB started saying things they shouldn't know, things they couldn't possibly know, Thomas's entire sense of reality began to unravel. It started in April of 2023, on a run from Nashville to Chicago. Thomas was hauling auto parts, a routine load on a route he'd driven hundreds of times. It was just past midnight when he merged onto I-65 North, and he keyed his CB to check in with other drivers. Breaker 19, this is Mack Truck northbound on 65 just past Nashville. Anybody out there got their ears on? The usual responses came back. A couple of drivers heading south warned him about construction near Louisville. Someone asked about weather conditions ahead, normal trucker talk. Thomas settled in for the long drive, the familiar voices on Channel 19 keeping him company. An hour into the drive, a new voice came on the radio. It was distorted, like it was coming through static, but clear enough to understand. Mack Truck, this is Night Watch. We need to talk about your daughter. Thomas's hands tightened on the wheel. Say again? Who is this? Your daughter, Emily. She's 23 years old, currently studying at Vanderbilt. We need to talk about her future. Ice flooded Thomas's veins. Emily was his daughter, and yes, she was at Vanderbilt, but that information wasn't public. He'd never mentioned her on the CB, never talked about his personal life with other drivers. How did this voice know? Who the hell is this? How do you know my daughter's name? We know many things, Mack Truck. We know you're hauling auto parts for Vickers Manufacturing. We know you have a scar on your left shoulder from a motorcycle accident when you were 19. We know you're afraid of what will happen when you retire and can't afford Emily's tuition anymore. That last part made Thomas's blood run cold. The fear about tuition was something he'd never told anyone, not even his wife. It was a private anxiety that kept him awake at night, that drove him to take extra runs even when he was exhausted. This isn't funny. I don't know how you're doing this, but leave my family out of your games. This isn't a game, Mack Truck. This is a warning. In 47 miles, you will see a broken-down vehicle on the right shoulder. You will be tempted to stop and help. You must not stop. If you stop, you will not survive the night. What are you talking about? But the voice had gone silent, replaced by the normal traffic of Channel 19. Thomas tried calling back to Night Watch, but got no response. He switched channels, cycling through all 40 available, but the strange voice was gone. Thomas tried to rationalize what had just happened. Maybe it was a hacker, someone who'd somehow accessed public records and was using them to scare truckers. Maybe it was a sophisticated scam. But even as he thought these things, he couldn't shake the feeling that something far stranger was happening. 47 miles later, exactly as the voice had predicted, Thomas saw a vehicle on the right shoulder, a minivan with its hazard lights flashing. He could see someone standing next to it, waving for help. Thomas's foot hovered over the brake pedal. Every instinct told him to stop, to help someone in need. That was what good people did. But the voice's warning echoed in his mind. You must not stop. If you stop, you will not survive the night. He made a decision that went against his nature. He kept driving, passing the broken-down minivan, watching in his mirror as the figure on the shoulder continued waving. Guilt flooded through him, but so did a primal fear that he couldn't quite explain. 2 miles later, his CB crackled to life again. Good choice, Mack Truck. You're learning. Who are you? What do you want? We are Night Watch. We are observers from a different perspective. We can see things that you cannot. Timelines, possibilities, outcomes. The person standing by that minivan wasn't who they appeared to be. If you had stopped, they would have killed you and taken your truck. We saved your life. Bullshit. That was just someone who needed help. Call the Kentucky State Police. Report the minivan. Tell them to be careful. You'll see we're telling the truth. Thomas didn't want to make that call, didn't want to validate whatever game was being played. But his curiosity won out. He called the state police, gave them the location of the broken-down minivan, and told them he'd passed someone who looked like they needed help, but he couldn't stop. "Thank you, sir," the dispatcher said. "We'll send a unit to check it out. Can you stay on the line?" Thomas stayed on the line for the next 15 minutes, continuing to drive north. Finally, the dispatcher came back, her voice tense. "Sir, the troopers are at that location now. The minivan was reported stolen 3 days ago. There's no one with the vehicle, but they found a substantial amount of blood in the back and what appears to be restraints. You may have avoided a very dangerous situation." Thomas thanked her and hung up, his hands shaking. The voice on the CB had been right. Somehow, impossibly, it had known. For the rest of the drive to Chicago, Night Watch remained silent. Thomas delivered his load, got some sleep at a truck stop, and picked up a return shipment heading back to Memphis. He told himself the whole thing had been a bizarre coincidence, that the voice couldn't really see the future or read timelines, or whatever nonsense it had claimed. But 2 nights later, on I-40 through Arkansas, the voice returned. "Mack truck, this is Night Watch. In 23 miles, there will be an accident. A car will lose control and cross the median. You need to be in the right lane, traveling at exactly 55 miles per hour. Any other position or speed, and you'll be involved in a collision that will kill 3 people. "No," Thomas said into the CB. "No, I'm not listening to you. I'm not playing this game. This isn't a game. Check your position. 22 miles now." Thomas looked at his GPS. He was in the left lane, doing 70. According to Night Watch, he needed to slow down and move right. But doing so would go against traffic flow, would be dangerous in itself. "I'm not doing it. You're just trying to cause an accident, not prevent one. 21 miles. Mack truck, please. We're trying to help. We've seen this timeline play out thousands of times. In most of them, you die. In some, you survive, but others don't. In only a handful do you take our advice, and everyone lives. Please." There was something in the voice now, not quite emotion, but something like desperation. Thomas found himself easing off the accelerator, letting his speed drop to 60, then 55. He signaled and moved to the right lane, even though it meant trucks behind him had to slow down. His CB erupted with angry voices asking what the hell he was doing. 18 miles, Night Watch said. "You're doing well. Maintain exactly 55. Thomas kept his speed locked at exactly 55, watching his speedometer like his life depended on it, and maybe it did. The miles ticked by. Other trucks passed him, their drivers probably cursing him for going so slow. Then, ahead in the distance, he saw it. A car in the northbound lanes, the opposite side of the highway, suddenly swerved, broke through the median barrier in a spray of dirt and metal, and went airborne. It sailed across the median, over the southbound left lane, and came down hard in the exact spot where Thomas would have been if he'd maintained his speed and lane position. The car hit the pavement and tumbled, rolling several times before coming to rest on the right shoulder. Thomas, who was exactly where Night Watch had told him to be, missed it by several hundred feet. He pulled over immediately and ran back to help, as did several other drivers. The car's driver was badly injured but alive. Emergency services arrived quickly. One of the paramedics told Thomas that if the car had hit another vehicle when it came across the median, everyone involved would likely have died. Thomas stood there on the side of I-40, shaking, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. The voice had known. The voice had saved lives. Back in his truck, he keyed the CB. "Night Watch, you still there?" "We're here. What are you? How do you know these things?" A long pause. Then, "We are difficult to explain in terms you would understand. We exist outside of linear time. We experience all moments simultaneously, past, present, future. We see the branching paths of probability, the infinite outcomes of every choice. And sometimes, very rarely, we find individuals whose choices carry unusual weight, whose decisions affect more than just themselves. You are such an individual, Mack truck." "Why me?" I'm just a truck driver. I'm nobody special. Everyone is special in the web of causality. But you, specifically, you are at a nexus point. The choices you make over the next 3 days will cascade outward in ways you can't imagine. People who will live or die based on your actions. Technologies that will be invented or never conceived. A future that branches in radically different directions depending on your path. That's insane. I don't have that kind of influence. You don't see it because you experience time linearly. But we see it clearly. In 72 hours, you will encounter a situation that will seem insignificant to you. You will be offered a choice that appears mundane. The choice you make will determine whether a particular person lives or dies. That person, if they live, will go on to develop medical technology that will save millions of lives over the next 50 years. If they die, that technology will never exist. Thomas felt overwhelmed. I can't handle this kind of responsibility. I can't be responsible for millions of lives. You already are. Every person is. Every choice matters. Every action ripples outward. We're simply making you aware of what is always true, and we're offering guidance. Over the next 3 days, Nightwatch continued to communicate with Thomas. Sometimes the advice was significant. Avoid a particular route where a bridge would collapse. Stop to help a driver whose truck would catch fire if left unattended. Other times it was trivial. Take a specific rest stop, eat at a certain restaurant, call his wife at an exact time. Thomas followed the guidance, partly out of fear and partly out of a growing trust. Every prediction proved accurate. Every warning prevented disaster. On the 3rd day, Thomas picked up a hitchhiker at a truck stop in Tennessee. It was against policy, but the kid looked desperate, and something about the situation felt important. The boy was 19, scrawny, carrying everything he owned in a backpack. Where you headed? Thomas asked. Nashville. I've got a job interview at a medical research company. It's my first real opportunity, you know? But my car broke down, and I don't have money for a bus ticket. Thomas felt a chill. This was it. This was the choice Nightwatch had been preparing him for. He could drop the kid in Nashville and ensure he made the interview. Or he could drive past, leave the kid stranded, and that entire future, the medical technology, the millions of lives saved, would evaporate. Nashville it is, Thomas said. Let's make sure you get to that interview. The kid's name was David Chun. Thomas drove him straight to the research company, even though it meant going out of his way and being late for his own delivery. He waited while David went inside, and when the boy came out an hour later with a huge smile and a job offer, Thomas felt something profound shift in the universe. That night, Nightwatch came on the CB for the last time. You did it, Mac Truck. You made the right choice. The timeline is locked now. David Chin will go on to develop revolutionary cancer treatment protocols. Millions will live who would have died, all because you picked up a hitchhiker. Will you keep guiding me? Keep warning me about dangers? No. Our work with you is complete. The nexus has passed. You return to your normal life, your linear experience of time. But know this, the choices you made over these 3 days will echo through history. Your name will never be in textbooks, but your influence will be felt for generations. I don't even know what you are, where you come from. We are what humanity might become, given enough time and evolution. We are your descendants from a future so distant you couldn't comprehend the timeline. We exist outside of causality, but we can still reach back and guide when necessary. Not often, the universe has rules about such things. But sometimes, at critical junctures, we intervene. Consider yourself blessed with a very rare gift, the knowledge that your life mattered in ways you'll never fully understand. The voice fell silent. Thomas tried calling out to Nightwatch over the following days and weeks, but never got a response. The CB radio returned to its normal function, truckers talking about traffic and weather and the best places to eat along various routes. Thomas McKenzie continued driving for another 7 years before retiring. He never told anyone about Nightwatch, knowing they'd think he was crazy. But he followed David Chin's career from a distance, reading news articles about the young researcher's breakthrough work on cancer treatments, watching as the technology David developed began saving lives around the world. And sometimes, late at night, Thomas would key his CB radio and say into the darkness, "Nightwatch, if you're still listening, thank you. Thank you for choosing me." No response ever came. But Thomas didn't need one. He knew that somewhere, somewhen, in a future so distant it might as well be another universe entirely, His descendants were watching over the timeline, making subtle corrections, guiding humanity toward a better path. And he knew that the strange voices on the CB radio, the ones that other truckers occasionally reported hearing, the ones that seemed to know impossible things and offer cryptic warnings, those voices were real. They were guardians from beyond time, reaching back to steer the present toward a brighter future. All you had to do was listen, and trust that some things that seem impossible might just be interventions from a reality more complex than we can imagine. Story 8. The Final Delivery. Catherine Reeves had been driving trucks for 18 years, building a reputation as one of the most reliable drivers in the business. She never missed a delivery, never damaged cargo, never had an accident or serious violation. So when she was offered a special job in December of 2022, a single delivery with a payout that would let her retire 5 years early, she said yes without hesitation. It was a decision that would take her to a destination that wasn't supposed to exist, delivering cargo that was never meant to arrive. The job came through a broker she'd worked with before, a man named Richard Holloway, who specialized in unusual shipments. The details were straightforward. Pick up a sealed container in Seattle, deliver it to a specific location in rural Montana, get paid $200,000. The container was small, only 8 feet long, and could be towed on a standard trailer hitch rather than requiring a full semi-truck. "What's in it?" Catherine asked during the phone call where Richard explained the job. "I don't know. And honestly, you don't want to know," Richard replied. "It's legal. I've verified that personally. But it's sensitive. Government research, I think, something being transferred to a secure facility. They want someone with a perfect record, someone who won't ask questions or poke around. That's why I thought of you. 200,000 seems excessive for what sounds like a simple delivery. The route is difficult. You'll be driving through some of the most remote terrain in Montana, much of it on unpaved roads. The destination doesn't have a name, just GPS coordinates. And there's a time constraint. You have exactly 48 hours from pickup to delivery, not a minute more or less. If you're early or late, the deal is off and you don't get paid." Catherine considered it. The money was incredible and the timeline was tight but manageable. "Okay, I'm in." She picked up the container on a cold December morning from a warehouse on the outskirts of Seattle. The container was matte black, unmarked, and sealed with what looked like high-tech magnetic locks. It was mounted on a small trailer that Catherine could hook to her personal truck. She wouldn't need her full rig for this job. 2 men in dark suits supervised the pickup. They said nothing except to provide her with a GPS unit pre-programmed with the delivery coordinates and a document outlining the exact schedule she needed to follow. "Do not deviate from the route," one of the men said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Do not stop except for fuel at designated locations. Do not attempt to open the container. And above all, do not be late." Catherine signed the paperwork, hooked up the trailer, and started driving. The route took her east through Washington, across the Idaho Panhandle, and deep into Montana. For the first day, everything was normal. Interstate highways, well-maintained roads, regular gas stations. But as she penetrated deeper into Montana, following the GPS unit's directions, the roads became narrower and less traveled. Pavement gave way to gravel, then to dirt. Civilization disappeared behind her. The December landscape was stark and frozen, mountains rising on all sides, forests of pine giving way to bare rock. The GPS unit beeped periodically, confirming she was on schedule. Catherine had to admit that whoever had planned this route knew what they were doing. The timing was precise, accounting for the slower speeds on unpaved roads, the winding mountain passes, the occasional need to stop for fuel at tiny gas stations that seemed placed specifically for this journey. On the evening of the second day, as the sun was setting behind the mountains, Catherine noticed something odd. The GPS was directing her toward what looked like a dead end, a canyon that terminated in a solid rock wall. But the device insisted she continue, showing the destination as just a few miles ahead. She kept driving, her truck bouncing over rough terrain, the trailer rattling behind her. The canyon walls rose higher on both sides, cutting off the failing light. Shadows lengthened and merged into darkness. Then she saw it, a seam in the rock face ahead. Not a natural opening, but a perfectly rectangular cut, like a doorway carved into the stone. As her headlights illuminated it, she could see that it was a tunnel, artificial, lined with smooth concrete, descending into the earth. The GPS beeped. Destination ahead. Proceed into tunnel. Catherine stopped the truck and stared at the opening. This wasn't on any map. This wasn't any kind of facility she'd ever heard of. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to leave, to forget the money and get back to civilization. But she thought about retirement, about not having to drive through winter storms or endure weeks away from home, about security and comfort and finally resting. She drove into the tunnel. The passage was wide enough for her truck and trailer with room to spare, but the ceiling was low enough that Catherine felt claustrophobic. The tunnel descended steeply, spiraling downward into the earth. Lights embedded in the walls provided dim illumination, casting everything in a sterile white glow. She drove for what felt like 20 minutes, though her clock seemed to malfunction, the display flickering between different times. The GPS showed her destination getting closer. 1 mile, half a mile, a quarter mile. The tunnel opened into an enormous underground chamber, so large that Catherine couldn't see the far walls in the darkness. Her headlights picked out structures in the gloom. Buildings that looked like they'd been carved directly from the rock, strange geometric shapes that might have been machinery or sculpture or something else entirely. The GPS directed her to a specific location in the center of the chamber, where a circular platform sat elevated above the floor. Catherine maneuvered the truck and trailer onto the platform and put the vehicle in park. For a moment, nothing happened. The chamber was silent except for her engine and the whisper of ventilation from unseen ducts. Then lights began to come on around the platform. Not normal lights, but something that made the air itself glow with a pale blue luminescence. Figures emerged from the surrounding darkness. At first, Catherine thought they were wearing protective suits, the kind used in hazardous environments. But as they got closer, she realized with growing horror that the suits were their skin. These weren't human, or if they had been human once, they'd been changed into something else, tall, thin, with movements that were too fluid and faces that were too symmetrical. One of them approached her window and made a gesture. Catherine understood that she should stay in the truck. The figures moved to the trailer and began working on the container, their long fingers manipulating the locks with practiced efficiency. The container opened, and light poured out, not reflected light, but light that seemed to be generated from within the container itself. Catherine couldn't see what was inside, but the figures' reactions made it clear that whatever they'd been waiting for had arrived. They lifted something from the container. Catherine caught a glimpse of it in her rearview mirror, a sphere about 2 feet in diameter, surface shifting with colors that didn't exist in nature, pulsing with internal rhythms like a heartbeat. The figures carried the sphere toward one of the carved structures, moving in a procession that felt ritualistic. As they walked, the sphere's pulsing intensified, and Catherine felt it in her chest, in her bones, in her very cells, a vibration that resonated with something deep and fundamental. One of the figures returned to her truck and handed her a device through the window, a rectangular panel with a single button. It pressed her hand to the button, and the panel lit up with text in English. Delivery confirmed. Payment transferred. Depart immediately. Catherine didn't need to be told twice. She started the truck, left the now empty trailer on the platform, and drove back toward the tunnel. In her rearview mirror, she saw the figures gathering around the sphere, and for just a moment before she entered the tunnel, she saw it open. Inside the sphere was a light that looked like a door, or maybe a window, showing something that might have been stars or might have been something stranger. Other universes, other dimensions, other realities bleeding through into this one. Then she was in the tunnel, driving up and up and up, her heart pounding, her mind struggling to process what she'd seen. The tunnel seemed shorter on the way out, or maybe time was working differently. When she emerged into the canyon, it was still night, but according to her truck's clock, 5 minutes had passed since she entered. Catherine drove through the night and into the next day, pushing her truck to its limits, desperate to put distance between herself and that underground chamber. She didn't stop until she reached a major highway, didn't breathe easily until she saw other vehicles and signs of normal civilization. When she checked her bank account, the $200,000 was there, transferred from an account with no name, just a string of numbers. Catherine Reeves retired from trucking immediately. She told people she'd made a good investment, that she'd saved carefully over the years. But she never spoke about the final delivery, never told anyone what she'd seen in that chamber beneath the Montana mountains. But she dreams about it sometimes. Dreams of that pulsing sphere and the figures that weren't quite human and the light that looked like a doorway to somewhere else. In her dreams, she understands that what she delivered was important in ways she can't comprehend. A key, maybe, or a message, or a piece of technology from elsewhere being returned to those who created it. She wonders about the tunnel, if it's still there, or if it only existed for that one night, for that one delivery. She wonders about the other drivers Richard Holloway might have contacted over the years, other deliveries to other impossible destinations. She wonders if she was the first or just the latest in a long line of unknowing couriers carrying things that shouldn't exist to places that aren't supposed to be real. And sometimes, late at night, she considers going back, trying to find that canyon again, to see if the tunnel is still there. But she never does, because some destinations are meant to be reached only once, and some knowledge is too heavy to carry back into the ordinary world. Catherine lives comfortably now, in a small house by a lake, far from highways and trucks and deliveries. But on clear nights when the stars are bright, she goes outside and looks up at the sky, remembering that sphere and the light inside it. And she wonders if somewhere out there, or maybe right here, but hidden in the spaces between ordinary reality, those not quite human figures are doing something important with what she brought them. Something that will change the world, or save it, or maybe connect it to something far stranger than anyone imagines. She was just a truck driver. She made one delivery that she'll never understand. But somehow, Catherine knows with absolute certainty that it mattered, that she played a small role in something vast and incomprehensible. And that knowledge, more than the money, more than the comfort of retirement, gives her life a meaning she never expected to find. Because some cargo isn't just goods being transported from place to place. Some cargo is destiny itself, moving through the world in the hands of ordinary people who become extraordinary simply by saying yes to the journey, by making the final delivery to destinations that exist just beyond the edge of what we think is real.